Welcome to the Restore Human Joint Circle Self-Care Routine for you to follow along. Small disclaimer before any of these movements. Should you find pain or discomfort in any of the ranges of motion that you're currently working through, just back off and make the circles smaller. We're looking for pure, easy, pain-free range of motion to start with, from which we can then develop further. Neck circles. Thinking about the head and the neck moving through a long, easy circle, approximately 3 rotations on each side, aiming for smooth movement, no jerky positions, not trying to fight through any pain. From there, scapulothoracic, really trying to get a long, deep circle, protraction, retraction, elevation and depression, aiming to keep the elbows locked, aiming to keep the body still and not rotating or tilting from side to side. Really try and draw that circle, focusing on the scapula or shoulder blades. From there, moving into the elbows, looking to create extension and flexion of the elbows while rotating into palms up and palms down. Whichever way you start, just think of flexing the elbows with your palms facing one direction, rotate at the top of the movement, and then bring the arms back down. From there, glenohumeral or shoulder cars. Really focus here on keeping the body alignment completely facing forward. Try not to tilt or rotate the body. Elbow stays locked. Try and prevent the shoulders from lifting up into the ears. We're looking for pure movement of the shoulder. Again, the circle wants to be nice and even. Working both hands together will save some time. You can also explore one arm at a time should you find the 2-arm variation very challenging. The key here is again to keep that rotation of the shoulder as it's going up and down. From there, moving into the wrists. Trying to maintain the wrists, forearms in one plane, i.e. not rotating those forearms. What I want you to focus on is drawing as deep a circle as you can, making sure that you can balance something on the forearms should you have to. Try and extend the fingers and the hands, really focusing on drawing that circle as big as you comfortably can. Go both directions, switching every 360 degrees. Key consideration here is that you're also maintaining a position in your spine, not starting to arch your low back to try and get more and more purchase in your wrists. From the wrists, we're going to go to the thoracic spine. So making sure here that you're able to move through all of the directions of flexion, extension, rotation, sideward flexion, trying to prevent any other part of your body from moving as you're doing so. Very important here as well is that you keep the hands connected to the chest at all times of the circle, and should you find yourself starting to flare the elbows or starting to arch through your low back, just backing off the range a little bit and really trying to work on the pure movement of your thoracic spine, your upper spine. Again, aiming for 3 or so movements, rotations in each direction. From here, we're going to look at spinal cars on the floor. So we're looking at flexion and extension of the whole spine, moving your neck first of all through its position, flexing through the upper spine, connecting into the mid-spine. Try and move one piece of the spine at a time. Think of a string of pearls analogy. Once you've achieved as much flexion as you can, then keeping the upper neck and thoracic region fixed, start tilting the pelvis anteriorly, and again passing one segment to the other, move into extension. The whole spine should have that lovely extended shape, and then keep alternating back and forth, traveling segment to segment to segment, connecting finally with the pelvis, tilting posteriorly. You should have that lovely flexed shape going through the spine now. As you're doing this, try and keep the elbows locked, try and keep the weight distribution the same on hands, knees and feet. From here, moving into hip cars, think about flexing the hip to bring the knee towards the elbow, then opening the knee out into abduction. Think moving on to the side of the body with the knee, then pulling back into extension before finally coming through the flexion, and then reversing that. So now bringing into extension, opening up the hip into abduction, pulling it back towards the knee and back towards the elbow in flexion. So you can see you're moving in both directions, preventing any movement through the spine, really challenging every other joint to stay exactly where it is, trying to prevent the hips from tilting too much, purely drawing the movement through that hip architecture. The standing variation, again, pulling the hip into flexion, feeling the knee come up to the midline of the body, internally rotate, and then pulling the hip into flexion, really watching the side of the body so that there's no extraneous movement here, just the hip, that rotation, flexion, and the spine should be almost unmoving through this entire arc. Flexion, abduction, internal rotation, followed by pure extension of the hip. From there, we're going to go on to the knees. With the knees, you're going to think about turning the aspect of the knee and the lower leg. So tilt the foot and move and rotating that lower leg within the knee joint, and then flexing and extending the knee. It's very much like the elbow cars, now done from the perspective of the knee joint. So whichever way you tilt your foot, then you're going to extend the knee, straightening that knee joint. Then you're going to rotate that knee, looking for that pivot, and then flexing the knee, pulling that knee back into the midline. Feel as much as you can that rotation pairing up with the extension and the flexion, as you can see in the video. From there, we're going to look at the ankle joint. Minimizing this time the rotation in the knee joint, really trying to focus on the ankles doing all of the work. You're going to dorsiflex, just think of curling those toes back towards the front of the calf, and plantar flex, think of moving the toes as far as you can away from the top of the calf, front of the calf, and then while you're doing that, creating as much rotation, inversion and eversion of the foot as possible. So there's a tilt and a rotation all at the same time. Finally, looking at toe cars. Can you place your feet down on the floor and then think about the toes, all of the little toes staying fixed on the floor as you lift your big toe up independently on both feet, and then pressing both big toes down as you lift your little toes up